Yes, you read that correctly. You've been watching the prequels wrong. Now, it's totally fine to boot up Disney Plus or whip out a Blu-ray and watch the Star Wars prequels as they are, but what if I told you there was a completely different way to watch the trilogy? A way to watch the trilogy that keeps everything you loved about the films, does away with everything you didn't like, and transforms the films into something completely new while still maintaining the original vision of the story. Well, there is a way to watch the prequels like that, and it's called the Blackened Mantle. Let's get into it. Over the past few years, the prequel trilogy has gone under a sort of renaissance within the Star Wars fandom. This is partially due to some fans' disappointment with the current direction the franchise has taken, who look back on the prequels with sort of rose-tinted lenses, claiming it isn't as bad as modern Star Wars media, but also because many of the people who were kids when the prequels were coming out, such as myself, are now grown adults with a voice on the internet, and can find community with others who also love the prequels. These fans grew up surrounded by fans of the original trilogy who were very, very critical of the prequels, kinda like how a lot of people are now of the sequel trilogy. But I'm sure that's just a coincidence and won't have a similar effect in 10 years or so with the generation that grew up with those movies. That would be ridiculous. Although I adore the prequel trilogy, I can recognize a heavy factor of my enjoyment for them is nostalgia. As much as I wish I could say they're flawless films, that's just not the case. And this may be shocking to some people, but that's perfectly okay. I don't hold any delusions that these films are misunderstood or actually do have a good dialogue, or think that their narratives are really flawless if you break it down. But I do still get giddy every time I see Darth Maul ignite his double-bladed lightsaber, or see Jango Fett drop a seismic charge in the asteroid fields, or see Anakin and Obi-Wan navigate their starfighters to the invisible hand over the Battle of Coruscant. But despite the nostalgic joy I get from revisiting those movies, I can understand that there are a lot of aspects of those films that are pretty poorly executed. The dialogue is clunky and stiff, and there are weird convoluted narrative choices that don't make a whole lot of sense. One day I came across a video over on the Overly Sarcastic Productions channel discussing Revenge of the Sith. OSP's detailed diatribe on Revenge of the Sith is where I first heard about the Blackened Mantle. I'll link their video in the description, and I highly recommend checking it out. I'd actually recommend all of Overly Sarcastic Productions content. They're incredibly well-educated people over there, and I could only hope to be half as eloquent explaining my thoughts as they are. Anyways, OSP first brought up an alternative way of watching Revenge of the Sith, which they called Kurosawa mode, which is basically watching the film in black and white with the Japanese dub. This idea was first proposed by CinemaSticks, which they also disclaimed, and I'll link his video down in the description too. Now, we'll get to the Blackened Mantle soon, but first we need to talk about this Kurosawa mode of watching the prequels. The basic idea is to put an emphasis on the music and emotion from the voice actors in the Japanese dub without any of the poorly scripted dialogue that the original English dub has, allowing the viewers to be more immersed in the movie, or as Overly Sarcastic Productions put it, stark visuals, no intelligible dialogue, and all vibes. Now, some of you who don't spend their free time browsing Wikipedia or running through the bonus features on DVDs in this modern age of streaming might be wondering why this way of watching the prequels is called Kurosawa mode.
That's why I'm here.
The Star Wars movies have taken inspiration from various works predating the original film in 1977. From Flash Gordon's movie serials to Frank Herbert's sci-fi novel Dune, various imagery and themes have been drawn upon for the creation of the Star Wars galaxy. One crucial source of inspiration for George Lucas's universe was Japanese films. To be more specific, the films of Japanese filmmaker Akira Kurosawa. George drew heavily from the narrative of Kurosawa's black and white 1958 film, The Hidden Fortress, for his own first installment in the Star Wars franchise. You could find a lot of parallels between the two films, including a focus on the two squabbling peasants for Hidden Fortress and two bickering droids in A New Hope with R2-D2 and C-3PO. Or how about an older general escorting a princess back to her homeland in the Hidden Fortress, or back to a rebel base in George's movie. These inspirations from Japanese media and culture don't end there and would continue to carry on throughout Lucas's other Star Wars films. Darth Vader's armor was based not only in Ralph McQuarrie's concept art, but the costume designer of the original trilogy, John Mallow, was also inspired by samurai armor, which I think you can really see that in Vader's helmet especially. The word Jedi was also taken from the Japanese term Jidaigeki, and I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. But Jidaigeki is a specific genre where stories are usually set before 1868, which, funnily enough, some of Kurosawa's films, including Seven Samurai and, wouldn't you know it, Hidden Fortress, are also considered to be Jidaigeki. Jumping from the 1970s to the 2020s, Star Wars returned more transparently to its Japanese influences with the release of Star Wars Visions, where various professional anime studios presented a short film with each of their own takes on the Star Wars universe in seasons 1 and 3 of the show. Season 2 was a little different in the fact that it had animation studios from all over the world present a short film, where seasons 1 and 3 were exclusively Japanese studios. Although season 2 still rips. I adore Star Wars Visions, it's so much fun. If you get a chance to check them out, they're so cool. None of it is canon, but it's still so cool to see all these creators put their own spin on the Star Wars universe. So now that we understand a bit of the influence Japanese culture, and especially Akira Kurosawa, had on Star Wars, we can understand why viewing the Japanese dub in black and white of the films is called Kurosawa mode. But what if it's taken a step further? What if we could take the benefits of the stark contrast of viewing the prequels in black and white, the vibes and the emotion of the music and performances of the dubbed voice actors, but also present an improved take on the dialogue? And, well, if you were to improve the dialogue, why wouldn't you also just change the context of a few scenes? And if we're already doing all of that, why don't we just cut the film a little differently for a new twist on the movies? This brings us to the Blackened Mantle, a fan edit that combines all 3 of the Star Wars prequels into one grand epic. Now, there are plenty of fan edits of the prequel trilogy that cut out unnecessary scenes or awkward dialogue, or just Jar Jar Binks sometimes. So what makes this one so special? Well, the Blackened Mantle was originally released in 2015 by a man named Scott Mooney under the name Darth Lunar, who now goes by Grimrook. Again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Grimrook explains the process best, as he says he wrote a brand new script for the edited film by splicing footage with Japanese audio and writing new English subtitles over the top. As he states, the new script weaves timelines of the 3 prequels together and tries to tell a more persuasive version of Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side. Throughout the years, other creators like G. Matthias and Nick Confalone, aka Spunito, would contribute to the effort, making revisions and updates to the Blackened Mantle. This fan edit, as I said before, combines all 3 of the prequel movies, using Revenge of the Sith as sort of the main focus, while the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones are used as flashbacks throughout the movie, and shown in sepia to visually differentiate the flashbacks from the present day. Like the creator said, this edit uses the Japanese dub of the movies, or as Overly Sarcastic Productions put it, this project went Kurosawa mode. However, the subtitles for the project are not entirely the original script of the movies. Grimrook, while cutting and rearranging parts from the prequels, also took the opportunity to make changes to the script of the film. Some of the cheesy lines are replaced, of course, but the reinterpretations also end up changing the story in some pretty major ways. In 2024, Nick Confalone, or Spunito, released a variant of the Blackened Mantle known as the Kurosawa edition. This version of the film is in, you guessed it, black and white. As Nick himself puts it, visually the grainy black and white with sepia flashbacks pays homage to George Lucas's cinematic influences while simultaneously smoothing over the series' early CGI goofiness. I do want to disclaim the Blackened Mantle is not a replacement for the original films. In fact, it might be a bit confusing if you haven't already seen the original prequel trilogy, but it's an amazing project that has been put together with so much care and passion by these creators, and I have so much respect and admiration for them. So what kind of changes to the story does the Blackened Mantle make to the prequels? For this portion of the video, we will be getting into spoilers for the Blackened Mantle, so if you even have a little bit of curiosity about checking out this project, I'd recommend you pause the video here and go check it out for yourself. Then come back to this video. Even if you have seen the official releases of episode 1, 2, and 3, I would urge you to go into the fan edit of this as blind as possible, because the changes to the story are so cool to experience. Okay, the spoiler section of the video is starting now.
This is where the fun begins.
So there's a handful of changes from the original script of the prequels that the Blackened Mantle makes. For the purposes of this discussion, we'll be talking about the Kurosawa edition, which is slightly different from the original Blackened Mantle, but something they both have in common is that neither of them have the iconic Star Wars opening crawl. Instead, we are hit with the classic, "A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away," followed by a Star Wars title card. Both of these are in Japanese text, emulating the feeling of classic samurai films. Then we are thrown right into the beginning of episode 3, with Anakin and Obi-Wan flying their starfighters through the battle over Coruscant. Now, I'm not going to go scene by scene because that would take up so much time and make this video like 5 hours long, just with the sheer amount of changes that are made. So I'll just go over the big changes and the changes I found interesting or noteworthy. One big change is that the relationship between Padme and Anakin is no longer a secret in this cut of the movie. Anakin's visions of the future of Padme dying is less of a vague nightmare like it is in Revenge of the Sith, and leans more into its Dune inspirations, where Anakin's visions of the future are precognitions. We even see a flashback of a young Anakin explaining to Qui-Gon Jinn that he saw a vision of a pod racer crashing, and the next day that vision came true. One of my favorite changes is that we get a new backstory for General Grievous. You might be wondering, wait a minute, we never got to see Grievous's backstory in the prequels, and you'd be absolutely correct. This edit actually combines the General with another character of the prequels, Darth Maul. We discovered Darth Maul was actually Count Dooku's apprentice alongside Qui-Gon Jinn, and survived getting cut in half by Obi-Wan. Instead of the scene in Attack of the Clones where Dooku tells Obi-Wan that there is a Sith Lord named Darth Sidious in control of the Senate, Dooku tells Obi-Wan that he's found Maul's remains from his duel with Obi-Wan, and that Maul is still alive. 13 years after Maul and Obi-Wan's first duel, Maul is shown to be transformed into General Grievous to have a final showdown with the Jedi Master. And I think this dynamic just adds a whole new layer of rivalry to his encounters with Obi-Wan. As cool of an idea as this is, it would mess with canon drastically and deprive us of the beautiful ending Maul had at the end of Star Wars Rebels, but even so, it's still such a cool what-if concept. The conversation between Palpatine and Anakin about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise is also tweaked. In the original movie, it's a bit weird how this politician knows the story of a Sith Lord, so in the Blackened Mantle, Palpatine tells Anakin the story of his mentor, Plagueis the Wise, a galaxy-renowned scholar who also had precognitive visions like Anakin has. Plagueis saw a vision of his own death and in a panic, trained and practiced self-defense to the point of his own death. Palpatine tells Anakin the moral of the story is, prophecy is dangerous if you lack the power to command it. While the Jedi have told Anakin it's impossible to control the future, Palpatine points out that the Jedi haven't always been right. This version of the story makes it a little less obvious that Palpatine is a Sith Lord grooming Anakin to turn on the Jedi, and gives him a little bit more of a subtle approach of planting more seeds of doubt in Anakin's trust of the Jedi Council. Only later in the film does Palpatine reveal to Anakin that Plagueis had studied the dark side of the Force, which at that point Anakin realizes that Palpatine is a Sith Lord. Speaking of Palpatine, in this version it's implied that Palpatine has used the Force to gain immortality, which once again does mess with canon, but is also a nice little nod to Palpatine's obsession with immortality within both Legends and the canon Star Wars universe. It's also revealed that the old wrinkly scarred face of the Emperor is in fact Palpatine's true form, and not just a result of Palps getting his own Force lightning reflected back at him by a lightsaber. Which, how many times is that gonna happen before he realizes that Force lightning is not gonna work if someone has a lightsaber? Also, just as a fun little tidbit, there is no execute Order 66 line, but instead Palpatine tells the clones to commence the Great Purge, which might not sound crazy, but I just thought it was interesting since within the canon Star Wars universe, they always refer to Order 66 as the Great Jedi Purge. I don't know, I just thought it was kinda cool. The events leading up to Anakin and Obi-Wan's epic duel on Mustafar in the original Revenge of the Sith are a little bit wonky in terms of reasoning. We all know the meme-worthy dialogue.
Your new empire? Don't make me kill you.
But in this version, there's a flashback right before the conflict where a young Obi-Wan is holding a dying Qui-Gon after their duel with Darth Maul. Qui-Gon makes Obi-Wan promise him to train Anakin as a Jedi, but he also makes him promise should Anakin fall to the dark side, Obi-Wan must do what needs to be done. Bringing us back to the present where Anakin force chokes Padme, believing she has brought Obi-Wan to Mustafar to kill him. Padme actually dies from this instead of dying from just losing the will to live, making Anakin's visions of Padme's death a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts. Pointing this out, Obi-Wan actually tries to talk Anakin back from the dark side, telling him it's not too late to turn back. But at this point, Anakin is too far gone and claps back with the line, "If the dark side is so weak, prove it to me." Which Obi-Wan responds by saying, "If you want to fight me, I can't stop you, but I won't kill you," which is a promise he ultimately keeps. After defeating Anakin, instead of the "You were the chosen one" dialogue, Obi-Wan says it wasn't Anakin he was afraid of all this time. Rather, he was afraid of what he promised Qui-Gon all those years ago, and afraid he wouldn't be able to follow through. And instead of Anakin's classic, "I hate you" line, we get Anakin screaming at Obi-Wan to finish the job, which Obi-Wan replies with, "My brother is already dead. You killed him." The reasoning Obi-Wan leaves Anakin to burn without finishing him off in the original is the same. However, showing us that promise he made to Qui-Gon before the duel even begins just makes the ending all the more tragic. A very basic setup and payoff, but I think it really works. It also lends itself a little bit better to the older Ben Kenobi telling Luke Skywalker that Darth Vader killed his father, instead of, spoilers, Darth Vader being his father, making a very nice bridge to the original trilogy, but I'm getting ahead of myself. There are many other changes the Blackened Mantle makes to the prequel movies that tweak and change the story, from scenes cut slightly different to completely new montages, more subtle changes to the dialogue that flow a lot more naturally, and scenes that are recontextualized in ways that make you see the films in a completely new perspective. As much as I adore the original prequel films, the question does need to be asked. Is the Blackened Mantle a superior way to watch these movies? The Blackened Mantle cuts down on the runtime of the prequels by over half the length. While we do lose the voices of the original actors in the trilogy, the voice actors in the Japanese dub do give a phenomenal performance. There is an argument to be made that the lack of English dialogue also allows you to really notice the subtleties in the actors' physical performances as well. Then again, at this point in time, the prequels have become iconic movies in their own right. Between the nostalgia of the early 2000s and the sheer number of memes to come out of those movies, there's something to be said about the staying power of the prequel trilogy. For me personally, I vastly enjoy this edit just as much, if not a little bit more, than viewing the prequels unaltered. Despite breaking the canon in more than a few ways, the Blackened Mantle is such a breath of fresh air for this era of Star Wars. Obviously, whether or not it's better is going to vary from person to person, but I truly believe the Blackened Mantle is worth your time if you enjoy the Star Wars prequels, or maybe even more so if you didn't enjoy them. I think the fact that the Kurosawa edition of the Blackened Mantle is in black and white also lends itself perfectly for watching the Star Wars saga in the machete order. Which order to watch the Star Wars movies in has always been a hot topic. Some people say to watch in release order, some people say to watch it chronologically, and some people recommend the machete order, which is episodes 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, and then 6 and 7, 8, 9. In watching the movies in the machete order, you still get the big reveal of Darth Vader being Luke's father, and then you're able to watch the prequels as sort of a flashback between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. The Blackened Mantle in black and white makes us feel even more like we're traveling back in time to see Anakin in his prime before becoming Vader, really putting an emphasis on the flashback feeling. Not to mention it cuts down drastically on the watch time, and you don't have to suffer through the non-essential bits of the prequels. So I guess I was using a little bit of hyperbole at the beginning when I said you're watching the prequels wrong.
Liar!
There is no wrong way to watch the prequels, unless you're on your phone the entire movie. Especially if you're going to the theaters, just why are you on your phone? Watch the movie. But I wanted to bring up this edit because I think it is just as good, if not a better way to watch the prequels. And if you know of any other fan edits of any of the Star Wars movies or shows, I would love any recommendations you may have. This was my first time watching a fan edit of this scale and quality, and I was really blown away by it, so I would love to find more. I know there is a cut of the Kenobi TV show that the creator KP Films edited down to a 2.5 hour long movie that I'm super curious about. Maybe I'll make a video on that in the future if that's something anyone is interested in. But if you've already seen the Blackened Mantle, I'm very curious to know what you thought of the project. Did you enjoy it? Was it not really up your alley? Let me know down in the comments and let's continue the discussion there. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you sticking around this long, and I will see you guys in the next one. So until then, may the Force be with you.